Eu descobri que na nossa Constituição de 88, nós, mulheres, já éramos iguais, né, em direitos com os homens. E, bom, eu não entendia muito bem, porque eu sentia toda essa diferença, essa problemática, se nós éramos iguais, assim como os homens eram iguais aos homens, se as mulheres eram iguais aos homens em direitos na Constituição. E aí, andando pela cidade, fazendo meus grafites, eu entendi que essa diferença, ela vem por um outro caminho, né? A pior condenação do mundo, para mim, é o olhar do outro.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the last session of the day, the last that opens to the rest. Panmela Castro from Brazil, artist, graffiti artist, thinking woman, named by Newsweek in 2012 as a woman shaking the world. Barnard Global Symposium class of 2013, Sao Paulo. Jessica Greer Morris, America, playwright, co-founder of Girl Be Heard Theatre Company, activist for art. Ahdaf Soueif, worldwide thinking woman, writer, founder of Engaged Events, which hosts the Palestinian Festival of Literature, author of Maps of Love, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 1999. Barnard Global Symposium class of 2010, Dubai. Xing Danwen, artist, observer, thinking woman. Her photography and installations have been exhibited around the world. Barnard Global Symposium class of 2014, Shanghai. Ladies, gentlemen, women, men, and everyone in between, artists, thinking women, observers. I wonder if we could begin with a difficult question. And that is, certainly after the last panel, we decided we couldn't start with something neutral. So, as you can imagine, the challenge was set. Each one of you works in some kind of conflict zone, whether it is class, whether it is overt political conflict, or whether it is about urban development. And I was wondering if you could talk about the challenges that present themselves to you, either as you see yourself as artists or as you see yourself as women artists. And I wonder, Jessica, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I'm happy to start off. I actually...
Hometown girl
girl from New York. So I once got 24 roses, red roses, for Valentine's Day, and the card had one word in it from my paramour of the time. It said instigator, and that's it. So I'm really not afraid to kind of go into conflict zones, whether they be in my mind or in the neighborhoods that we serve. And I actually heard once from a dear friend of mine who's also an artist. She said, something about her mind being a dangerous neighborhood, so she wouldn't want to go there alone. And I think as artists, we often carry around some kind of existential pain, and if we keep it to ourselves, we can do a lot of damage, but if we share it with others, it can also be very healing for other people. So I think as a playwright, sharing our challenges and our struggles is one of the most important things that we can do, and I'm really blessed to have the best job in the world where we get to do storytelling, and as women and as girls, we get to share our stories, and no matter what we've gone through, we find that when we share our stories and our experience will benefit others. And in terms of very specific work that we've done in conflict zones, one of the first global shows we did was inspired by a group of youth delegates in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I actually had the great pleasure with Jimmy Briggs of launching Man Up campaign to stop violence against women and girls at the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. And I got the great pleasure of working with Panmela at that time, so it's really nice to be together with her on this panel. She was one of the youth delegates from Brazil, and we worked with 25 countries around the world. And I was so inspired by all the delegates, but in particular, the youth delegates in the Congo. And by the way, they were 4 men. 50% of the delegates we had were women, 50% were men. But the men were so passionate about stopping the violence. And I think when we talk about gender-based violence, it's really important to have both men and women staging the revolution to make change. So they said to me, I know you have a theater company. Is there any possible way you can tell the stories of the women and girls we're working with? We really think they need to be told, and they need to be told on the global stage. So we made a promise to them at that time, and we ended up not only creating a show based on their stories, but we actually had these young activists be the executive producers of the show. They worked with us the entire time, thanks to social media, to help us write the show and share their experience with us. And we were really made good on our promise. Not only did we do the show throughout New York City at festivals, but we ended up doing it at the Richmond Holocaust Museum and then at the White House. So that's pretty much the bedrock of our work is we want to get the stories out. And for the most part, we have a lot of stories to tell here in New York City. With gang and gun violence in some of the most underserved areas of the city, we have young people that are living with the threat of gun violence each and every day. And another show that we did a couple years ago was called 9mm America. And we called it a theatrical uprising to stop gun violence. And with this particular show, our young women that we were working with were so upset about what happened in Newtown that they wanted to write a show all about the tragedy of Newtown. And when they started researching, which is a really important part of our work, is empowering young women by teaching them the importance of doing research and the importance of data in talking about these statistics, all of them realized that they were affected by gang and gun violence right at home, and a majority of them realized that they were homicide survivors, that they had had a family member or a loved one die at the hands of a gun. So it completely changed the trajectory of the entire show. So I think it's really hypocritical for us in the United States to point the arrow at other countries and talk about poverty, and talk about war, and talk about social justice issues when we have so much, as all of you really smart Barnard students know, going on in our own country.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. And Panmela, would you like to talk about the kinds of spaces you have to go into and the work that your art does there, and maybe the challenges of going into those spaces?
Yeah. Barnard invited me to make the mural in the 6th floor. It's very nice, but it's very easy to come with all the security and make this. I think the hard work is when you go to the street. And my artwork talks exactly about this, the female body performing in the city landscape. And you talk about gender, you talk about femininity, everything through this body. And imagine how much dangerous you get to this body when it's in its freedom, but freedom in this city that has all kinds of people, all kinds of situations, everything. And in this way, the graffiti is just the image that we got with this process, that it's my artwork. And with the work I developed in my NGO, called NAMI, yes. That is not just me, it's all the girls, graffiti right. girls. I think the worst thing to change is, and the support is not important. We have to change the mind. The mind is more difficult, the work that we have to do, change the mind of people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I wondered, Danwen, if you would like to enter this conversation, please.
It's okay? Working?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know, I was born in Xi'an, the ancient capital city of Tang Dynasty and the first emperor. and I grew up there, and following my professional study, I went to Beijing, and after I started going abroad and go to different capital of art, and also I did my study in New York for my master. So I've been through the change of the cities, and through the time that I think that the most conflict issue is about this change, very intensive change over the past 20 years in China, which create very dramatic issues that involved in every perspective. When I think since in the middle of 90s, because I studied in Beijing in Central Academy of Arts, and my school was just located in the old street of Wangfujing, which is next to Tiananmen Square, very close. And that's a very traditional area. And then in the middle of 90s, the city started to change to tore down, demolish all these traditional houses and streets. And by that time, I followed the change until I went to New York. Then I came back. I have to say that I was so lost in the city. And I would say that even maybe often you drive to somewhere you feel you knew very well, suddenly you don't know where you are because there's no landmark anymore. The street change, the intersection change. The small street suddenly become a 8-lanes traffic big road. So suddenly you don't know where you are. That's how the urbanization happening in China. And so all this change actually become very important, inspiration to my work, that I have been creating different body work following the change of urban city, the landscape, to architecture, private space, public space, to the human being who live in the space.
Thank you. And Ahdaf, this is a question that seems really acute for you right now.
Well, actually, Yvette, I'm going to feel my way into this because you've made me sort of think in a way that I hadn't thought before as I tried to work out an answer to your question, conflict zones. So let me go at it like this. At one point in the mid-90s, having through a fluke of biography, found that I was writing in English, writing fiction in English, and then having married an Englishman and had 2 children, I actually found and therefore living in London with summers in Egypt, I found myself in a conflict zone, which nobody around me seemed to realize was a conflict zone. And in fact, maybe the voice that sort of comforted me and told me I wasn't mad was the voice of Edward Said, who recognized that I was in a conflict zone. And the conflict was to do with representation, that suddenly there I was supposed to be part of a society and a culture, which on the outside I fitted in with perfectly because I was speaking the language and writing in the language and having a career and having a husband from the culture and so on, but which I didn't actually fit in, and where everything that was supposed to be representative of me was wrong, whether it was to do with Egypt, whether it was to do with Islam, whether it was to do with Palestine, Israel. It was all other than what I knew it to be. And it was, I guess, out of that conflict, out of living in that zone, that The Map of Love was born. That was the novel that came out in '99. So until then, I had written fiction, and I'd written the odd book review. '99, The Map of Love came out and was shortlisted for the Booker. And that gave me a different profile and a different platform. And suddenly I was being asked to write about difficult subjects and given the platform to do so. So The Guardian asked me if I would go. The second Intifada had just broken out, and I was invited by The Guardian to go to Palestine and write about what I saw there, do reportage. And I did that at the end of 2000. And basically, that was the last time I wrote fiction. Because what happened was that I brought what skill or talent that I had in fiction, not inventing things, but making things come alive on the page and giving characters, in this case real people, a voice and engaging the reader's empathy, all the stuff that you do as a writer of novels or fiction. I brought it into writing reportage and essays, and that's then what I did. And after a while, it seemed clear that basically this was, okay, it was changing some consciousness, but it wasn't having an effect in the world. And with 3 women friends and my son, we dreamed up PALFest, the Palestine Festival of Literature, which you mentioned. And in 2008, we took the first lot of writers and authors to tour Palestinian cities and do seminars and literary events and so on. And we've been doing that ever since. We've now preparing the next edition, which is coming up in May. So it all became cultural activism. And I was always aware that I ought to be writing a novel. I always had a contract for the next novel, which I was not honoring and which was sort of really weighing on me and which kept being postponed. And then the revolution broke out in Egypt. And of course, I went and sat in the middle of it. And it became even more necessary to be a direct advocate and a direct sort of I'm not sure. I mean, I had a column, continue to have a column in Arabic. This was the first time. This was what pushed me into writing in Arabic. And I still can't write fiction in Arabic, but I can write a column. And it was really almost articulating the voice of the revolution to itself. I mean, not just me, other people as well. And that's what I've done since. And writing as well for, like, you know, The Guardian or the LA Times. And this was all born out of being in a conflict zone, which was immediate, and which seemed like you really had to give it everything you had on a daily basis. And what you had was writing. Now I'm at a point where it not only has writing not actually made a difference to the course of events, but the course of events has turned incredibly ugly. And now it has begun to seem that the way to engage with it is actually not by engaging on that daily sort of rather prosaic basis, but by stepping back and trying to engage in a more imaginative way through some kind of fictional writing. I'm at the point now where that is what I'm thinking about.
I can't wait. So I'm wondering, it seems almost inevitable to ask this question then. Is it, can art or how can art be, whether it's visual, whether it's written or performed, be an impulse for change? Yes.
In my case, I think art can shift the things because it can shift the culture. Most of the problem that we have in Brazil is like that. It's made by the culture, the constructs of the society. And with the art, especially when it's more directed, right, we can really change the way that people think about the things. Like we have this problem about the domestic violence, and we have a workshop that we talk with the kids, we invite them to paint about it. In the end of the workshop, we use the art to change these kids. And this is why I agree it can happen.
All right. Thank you. Jessica?
I would love to respond to that, yes. So there's something very powerful about creating a safe space for girls. We work with the entry age is 12 to 21 and creating a safe space for them to tell their stories. We've seen girls who are practicing self-harm come in and they stop cutting because they have a place where they can talk about what they're going through. We've had girls that are survivors of sex trafficking where they come and they can share and develop a whole family of girls and mentors that are going to support them. But what's even more powerful is when you create a performance and share it with people. And we always have talkbacks at the end of our performances, and for me, they're the most powerful part of the show, and I think our audiences would agree. We did a show that was about sex trafficking, and it was a number of years ago when people kept thinking that trafficking was happening in faraway lands, that Cambodia, Thailand, and we knew that it was happening to our girls, and that poverty was often a driver. It was happening in some of the most underserved areas of New York City. So we were able to put on that show, and we actually found a survivor who ended up joining the cast. We had an emergency audition to her. So one of the first times we did it was to help pass the Safe Harbor Act, which is an act here in New York City. They were jailing girls who were being prostitutes on the streets instead of jailing the pimps that were putting them there. So the Safe Harbor Act said if you're under 18 and you're a prostitute, you're actually a sex-trafficked child and you're enslaved. So we shouldn't be putting you in jail, we should be giving you services. And through that work, we met this incredible survivor from Jamaica, Queens. And she ended up joining the Traffic Cast, and we kept doing that show with the United Nations to help to raise the visibility of this issue. And through that, we met this incredible faith-based organization who flew our whole cast out to Dallas for their annual conference. And this was this incredible bunch of women. They were the women missionaries of the AME Church. And in front of 4,000 missionaries from around the world, we performed Trafficked. And through Traffic, we not only tell the story of girls who've been trafficked, but 7 out of 10 girls have or will experience physical or sexual violence in her lifetime. So we had another girl telling a story of being raped and another story of incest. And unfortunately, we have a lot of stories to tell. And after that performance, not only did the 4,000 women pray over us, but we had women ages 30, 40, 50, 60 come up to our cast and say, I've never told anyone this, but I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I've never told anybody this, but I'm a survivor of rape. I've never told anybody this, but I've been incested most of my life. And they didn't say it sadly. They said it as a huge relief. We think that performance can take the shame out of what women have to go through. And instead of holding us back and keeping our secrets, in many ways we're as sick as our secrets when it comes to gender-based violence.
Thank you.
Well, for this, I would say I'm mostly a quiet fighter. I let my work speak for me. And in my every different body of work, each work through my observation and thinking and being part of the experience that I bring up addresses issues that to deliver a message to the audience. And for example, well, there was, I did a work called Disconnection, which was quite successful in US because it was, the first show was in Whitney Museum in 2003, and also as the leading image for the exhibition. Well, I think with that work that I'm talking about, e-trash, electronic garbage became a nightmare in our century, especially that the picture I captured was in South China, that is all overseas electronic trash and shipped to China, dumped there, and in the remote area. And in fact, all this electronic trash was had a runway trip, was produced in China and shipped to, used in the West and come back to China. So that actually gives a lot of layers of serious issues inside. And also another work which is quite popular right now, it's called Urban Fiction, which is talking about how people in the new landscape of China architecture is talking about how private relationship to the public space and the urban landscape. In this work, I really talk about everyone in China economically get more increased and developed in their life. And all the money come is for making your life more happy. And everybody can buy many apartments, bigger and more fancy. But in this work, you see that in this work, actually, I'm especially addressing about the alienation and loneliness of today's life in these developed, wealthy, big cities. That if our life will be more happier when we have a better life, better, material life. Another work called War House, which was the work which especially addressing about loneliness. And I'm using myself, the work is, the figure is a woman. But it's again, not only about a woman's problem, it's about loneliness as a human being in this globalization. And in this work, I especially bring up the awareness about the loneliness is not a problem, it's a fact that we are living with and how you can live with it. So, and I try to suggest that you have to put yourself as your own partner for your life.
Thank you.
Yvette, do you want to take this, please? Yeah, I think what I'll do, I'll tell you a story about a particular artistic intervention during the revolution and what it meant. And in a way, it sort of looks like it ends up on a rather sad note, but I think it doesn't if one kind of believes in continuity and so on. We had two events, I'll talk about two events during the first year of the revolution, which were to do with women and which were to do with sexual violence against women. One was on the 9th of March 2011, where people were arrested from Tahrir Square, and the young women among them were subjected by the military on entering a military detention center, were subjected to what they called virginity tests, which were a mode of sexual violence and humiliation and so on. When the young women came out, one of them decided to take the military to court, which was an incredibly brave thing to do. So rather than internalize what had happened and so on, she actually went to court. And the court ruled for the women, and eventually the courts actually outlawed the process. The military, and the military spokesperson at the time was General Sisi, who is now our president, explained it by saying that it was a procedure because the women had to be taken into military detention, and there were no military detention facilities that were exclusively for women. Therefore, they needed to check whether a woman was a virgin before she went in, so that if she claimed to have been raped, it was insane. So, exactly. So anyway, the courts found for the women. Now, what happened was that as soon as this started being known, graffiti appeared on the walls of the city and proliferated very quickly, and it went through several stages, and the last stage of it, all happening very quickly, was a big face of the young woman. Her name was Samira Ibrahim, and she was wearing the hijab, and she had a very strong face, and it was big, and then underneath her was a platoon of officers with tanks. So there was tank, and on each tank there was an officer. The officers all had the same face, and it was the face of the medical doctor who had conducted the examination, and eventually it also had his name and phone number. So that appeared everywhere. Now, that's one story. The other story is to do with an image that many of you might have seen, which was actually in November, where again the military attacked protesters sit-in in Tahrir, and one of the images was of a young woman being dragged off, and her black abaya had opened up, and she was wearing a blue bra. So she was in jeans and a blue bra, and that image went viral as they dragged her away, and at one point there was a boot coming down on her chest. Now, there was no court case there because she has remained anonymous, and I think very wisely so, because in remaining anonymous, she became an enormous symbol. very quickly, I mean, that image appeared, but very, very quickly it just became the blue bra. So the blue bra appeared everywhere. And very quickly also, the blue bra was transmuted into the lam alif, which is no in Arabic, because the shape lent itself. So you had the blue bra, you had the lam alif saying no above it, and then it became just the lam alif in blue, and everybody knew what that meant. Very shortly afterwards, a new image appeared, which was, you all know Nefertiti, of course. You know Nefertiti and the tall crown. It was Nefertiti, like frowning, looking at you, and wearing a gas mask. At that point, there was a lot of gas being used by the police and the army on protesters. Gas, which I might say was all imported from Pennsylvania. So there was Nefertiti in a gas mask, and the colors of that image were the yellow and black of the No to Military Trials campaign, which was headed by a group of 5 young women, one of them being my niece. And so it became a very political statement. That was made into stickers. You could see it on people's bags. You could see it, people put it up on their doors. People even managed to paste it onto army vehicles and police vehicles. It was everywhere. Now, that all happened, and what it did was it expressed, articulated, unified, made real a sense, a very powerful sense, that violence against women and sexual violence against women was not acceptable, would not be tolerated. Protests went out for it, carrying these images, and there was one protest where hundreds of young men and women wore the Nefertiti masks and marched in them. Now, of course, afterwards, what happened was that as the anti-revolution got more and more powerful, sexual violence against women was used as a political tool. You had groups of men, groomed and trained, going out into the public arenas to do harm to women, to push them away from the public space, and there were defenders, both men and women, taking them on, and so on. The net result of all this, really, is not that violence has become less, but that violence has become spoken about. So that women have been on television speaking about what happened to them, describing it, and that has been very important. What has also been important is that this has led to men who are sexually humiliated and have acts of violence, sexual violence committed against them in police stations and in prisons, also speak about it. So that whole issue, yes, it has not gone away, and it won't go away until we actually have a decent system and a decent government. But instead of it being internalized and destroying the person to whom it happens, it has become something that is out there, that is spoken about, that is in the courts, that is agreed by society to be a bad thing. And I wouldn't say it's empowering, but it's certainly not taken in a spirit of victimhood anymore. And that was really the graffiti artists who made that happen.
Thank you. That is so important that to hear this, that the women also having the courage to speak out then actually makes a space for men to speak about the sexual violence. I think we should never forget the relationship between that. Again, now this almost seems a kind of a natural segue, at least for me, but I was wondering that for you, for each of you, if there were any particular artists or any particular models, role models, maybe women, maybe not, who inspired you to decide that art was the path that you would take? So who was your inspiration?
Well, I'll do this very quickly because it's very, very quick. For me, George Eliot was a big, the fact that I kind of like recognized myself in Maggie Tulliver, recognized myself in Dorothea, and so I learned an awful lot. And then Colette. And Colette was because of this sort of mix of, well, it's almost sort of chick-lit, really. But it's serious underneath, and it's romantic, and it's glamorous, and it's interested in clothes and makeup and carriages and so on. But it has a very strong feminist underlying it.
Thank you.
Yeah. For me, my inspiration is about the women that I met through my way in the city, and I listen to the histories, and it's feels me good or bad, and I put it in my walls. It's about life.
Thank you.
Well, for me, it was totally romantic because I was born in this little traditional town without any influence. My parents are not artists. I don't have people around me. But I don't know, since I could handle a pencil, I started drawing. There's something, a voice leading me that I want to be artist. But then when I start to fight for this goal, I start to understand that that artist was not, it's a very challenging role to be in life. And I have been through a lot of problems, difficulty. I think that being an artist, it's a battle inside yourself, and it's a war in your life that you have to fight for it, and to really, mostly you have to first fight for yourself, to yourself. Then you start through fighting to yourself, you observe the world, and to understand the world, and the world would reflect to you to let you understand you better. And that way, you can, through your own emotion, and bring up the message to the universe.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Jessica, if you would.
Sure. So I want to mention a couple of things. I mean, I'm very inspired by the girls that I get to work with and to hear their stories. I mean, that's always so inspiring. And I was thinking back on, when I was their age as a teenager, and the type of art that I was so attracted to was really dark. It was like Sylvia Plath, The Bell Jar. Remember Cat Stevens had a, album with this song about sad Lisa. Like,
yes.
I think there's a lot of, you remember that one? So I think there's a lot of misogyny in the world, and I think it's really hard not to hate yourself as a girl when every message you're getting is you're fat, you're ugly, you're stupid. I mean, if you look at the media, there's not a lot of media telling girls that they're perfect as they are. And I would say the same thing for women as well. And so for me, as a young person and a young artist, I was just trying to identify with someone who was suffering as much as I was, And so it's interesting how different it is now, because I have that opportunity to work with girls at a young age and tell them that they're perfect just as they are. And I thought that was a great question asked by one of the Barnard students earlier about your failures. I thought that was one of the best things I've heard all day. And I was thinking about it. I'm 47, and I have not weighed myself in 21 years. And, I think that there are some really important, powerful tools that we can share with each other as women to really fight back misogyny and fight back the fact that, when I was in high school, I wasn't seeing a lot of women artists because I was being told to read the history of men and men's books and seeing men on TV. So we're in a better age, but we still have a long way to go.
Thank you. I'm about to toss my scale out. No, but I it growls every morning. But I want to say, listening to everything that we heard today, how extraordinary it is to hear these 4 anchors here. If you don't mind, I call you anchors, but you are for me today, who understand that the place of art in the world where women have to take care of all of the practicalities, of all the political issues, of the financial issues, the educational issues, there has to be somewhere for the psyche, for the heart, for the thinking mind to imagine. So thank you so much. Thank you. And I wonder if we could open up to question and answers, and if I could ask you, because we have a treat for you, and the treat is not just that President Spa's coming back. There's a treat. We have a treat for you, so if you could please keep your questions to the point. Thank you. Yes. Young woman, 1, 2, 3 in the middle from the front. Thank you.
Hi, my question is for Ms. Soueif. I am a student at Barnard and a Palestinian American, and my question to you is for young artists. What advice do you have for balancing that multiple identities, and what challenges have you faced trying to put yourself out there, both professionally and as an individual?
So sorry, your question is what advice for young
artists with double identity, and what advice you have for us going forward?
Yeah. Well, I think really the advice for a young artist of whatever nationality, as it were, is to find your passion, find what you're good at, and link the two together. So you need to work out of your passion. The things that you do need to be things that affect you deeply. They don't have to be. I mean, you can be a Norwegian artist and be working on Palestine. It doesn't have to be. And then be as good as you can possibly be. Professional excellence is really important. And that is what, even if what you're interested in ultimately is the message, is change, that will only come through or come about through being really, really good at what you do. And being really good at what you do is easier if what you do is what you're passionate about.
Yes. Thank you. I don't know if anyone else would have something to say to this young woman.
Well, I think that, yes, passion is the driving, the key for you. And you have to believe what you want. I think in the world, there's only two things you have to do. What do you want and how to make it? And never give up. And I think persistency and consistency is most important to lead you to the future.
Are there any other questions? Or? Yes, thank you. Fourth row and, thanks, you can see. Yeah.
This is a big question for all of you. I'm class of 65 and I've had a career pioneering in emerging markets, so I've been in 45 countries, and it was a Barnard woman, Margaret Mead, who observed that how varied cultures were, there was one commonality that ran through all of them, whatever the most valued characteristics, whatever the most prestigious jobs, they were always men, and at the bottom were always women. That is the one constancy in culture, so it's species-wide. So I've been asking myself all this time, and I believe really only artists can answer this question. What is it we're changing? Our generation is changing the whole species. What do you as artists see that we're changing that's really transforming this ages-old, cross-cultural world we've lived in?
Okay, so as artists, maybe I don't know if you heard the question. So as artists, what do you see, or what do you see art doing to change the dominant mode of a kind of a headship, that men are always at the top? Am I right? You put it quite succinctly, but not so loudly. But what do you see art actually achieving? Is it really affecting change? Affecting change in terms of the gender dynamics. Am I right?
It was the Barnard woman, Margaret Mead, who made that observation.
Right. So I guess this is the hard question. We always expect art to do that kind of work. Yes.
Yeah. This is the same question that I do every day in my life. And I think art is more subjective and sometimes works or not inside of people. But sometimes you can use the art as tool for changing in another way that's more directly. Like in Brazil, we have this workshop that I talked, that we talk and then we invited the kids for make the draw. In fact, it's not the image that's changing the people. It's the process of doing the art, put your expression, getting people interested in understand to talk about this. This is how we made there.
So, and in a way, it's actually the evidence of these four artists on the stage. It says that something's happening, and the evidence of the people who have been on the stage before that say that something is happening. But I don't know if any of the other speakers would like to come into that. Or shall we?
I mean, simply put, I think we've dedicated our careers to art because we think art can change the world. And one of our philosophies, if we can change the life of one girl, we can change the lives of girls everywhere. So it can focus on one individual artist, but it can have a huge rippling effect on so many people. I actually had a relative, you always realize at Thanksgiving, who actually is listening to women and who is not. And when you try to bring up issues like 4.6% of Fortune 500s are run by women. You try to bring up equal pay. There are some people that kind of glaze over or start talking about something else. And then there are some people that, are in the choir that are just, listening to every word. But I do think art has the capacity to reach some people who might be glazed over. And I know I've had relatives who really didn't understand the depth of inequality or gender-based violence. After they see a show, we have a lot more to say to each other at Thanksgiving. So.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Are there any other? Oh, there's a question right to the back, over to the side. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Kende Mendes from MasterCard. As a self-proclaimed non-artist, Jessica just said art changes the world. I'm kind of curious what advice you might say to somebody like me in how I might utilize art or inspire myself to be an artist to do some of the things that you're talking about today.
I want this question.
It's yours.
It's so funny. When I interview people to come and work for us, my philosophy is I hire people smarter than I am to do their job, and then I put a little Miracle Grow on it. And the truth is, great art can't happen and can't be made without so many other incredible people helping to make that process happen. After each show, who do we thank the most? The stage manager, the person working behind the curtain. In terms of amplifying our work, there's so many incredible. We have our Director of Global Partnerships here today who's done an incredible job bringing Girl Be Heard's work around the world. She happens to be a great artist too, so I shouldn't say that, but there's space for everyone in the art world. I really truly believe that, and sometimes, quite frankly, for a certain job that needs to get done, I'm like, I don't want to interview another artist. I want to interview like an engineer. The first feminist in residence I hired was an engineer from Canada, a young woman who her parents, she's actually of Chinese descent, and her parents just wanted her to go straight into engineering school. And she really wanted to just, some people want to run away and join the circus. We have a lot of people that want to run away and join Girl Be Heard. So she ended up joining us and being our first feminist in residence, and then a couple years later went to engineering school. But we are hiring feminists in residence, so I say this to all the incredible young Barnard students. They're all paid internships, or we call them fellowships, and we'd love to have you apply.
Let me sort of just do something a little different. Obviously I set a high value on art, and I think art is really important, but I don't think it's the be-all and end-all, and I don't think that it necessarily changes the world. I think if I were to lay odds who could change the world quicker, me or Jennifer in the Financial Times knowing about money and how money works, I would say it was her, not me. So I don't think that we should necessarily look to art in that useful, utilitarian way, because if it is useful, it's useful in that it opens up avenues of thought, in that it creates the possibility of empathy with people that we will never know and situations that we will never live through. But it is not necessarily directly useful in actually altering how things are. I was listening, today was so incredibly rich for me to have women from all these backgrounds speaking with such a level of excellence. And what was happening was that a lot of the time I would agree with what was being said, and then there would be a question. Let me give you an example. Now, I really do believe that it is wrong for women's work in the home to be described as not working. She doesn't work. She stays home. Well, she doesn't, and we've heard the arguments, and we've heard about the monetary value of that work, of cleaning and caring and ironing and buying the food and all the rest of it. And this exercise has been done, and it has been shown to be worth thousands of dollars. Okay, now, but what my head says is there a way of recognizing this without demeaning it? Are we not in danger of turning everything into a discourse about value as a financial value? Are there not things that we all agree that money can't buy and that should not be discussed in terms of money? Okay, now how do you square this with actually agreeing that women's work in the home represents money as well? I think that's the kind of question that art also opens up and explores. It doesn't necessarily provide the answers. Often, mostly it doesn't provide the answers, but it opens up the question, and it opens up a way of thinking about the question, and that might lead to answers. And I think that possibly that and the creation of empathy are the most useful things that we look to art for. And if that's what we think, then there's no secret to how you kind of use art. You just go with it. And if you like something, if you like a film, if you like a novel, if you like a story, you just enjoy it and let it come into you and do whatever it's going to do inside you and don't ask for more.
Thank you. I have learned so many things today, and this was just a beautiful intervention. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? Do I see a question at the back? I started to sound like an auctioneer. Do I see a question at the back? Do I see it? Do I? Are there any other questions? Yes, there's Kitty, yes. Just, thanks. Mike is coming, Kitty.
Thank you. So I'm curious, here in the United States, arts education has really taken a huge hit. That is, we don't see music or art or playwright, anything in the schools like we used to do. And so I'm curious about what's happening around the world in art education and whether we're exporting that horrible phenomenon or whether we can begin to import it back from other places. So can you talk a little bit about what your countries do with art education?
Well, again, I'm going to jump in very briefly so that you can get the good news somewhere else. The state of education, the state of education in general in my country has sunk to an all-time low. And obviously when that happens, then the arts are at the bottom of that as well. So it's bad. People can get an education if they find a way to it and find ways of paying for it or whatever, but it is not on offer automatically at all.
Personally, if I hear STEM one more time without the A in it, I'm going to scream. I mean, there's so much money being put into STEM. I actually went to the White House earlier this year for a STEM event, and I just, in all the meetings we had, all the policy meetings, I'm like, what about the A? Like, call it STEAM. It's just really just not enough funding for the arts. And, you know, I've done a lot of work in a lot of other countries, and I can't speak for all of them, but the majority of them put much more money into arts education than our country does.
In fact, I think art education become a really very huge industry in the education universities in China now. Just say the school I graduated from my bachelor, Central Academy of Arts, when I was there was total 200 students for 5 grades. And today the school has maybe 5,000 students. So in fact, because first of all, I think the market, and then also this Chinese art boom that the past years was really, I think everyone knew, that actually create people change the concept that to learn art, also you can make a living.
In Brazil, we have this concept that art has to be at school, has to be part of this. But the fact that we have worse problems that to make the public school works, Portuguese, math, and all the things, because the education in Brazil is not good, and we are trying to make it better. The teachers don't receive well. We have lots of biggest problem. In this way, the art goes. It's not the principal thing, you know.
So, thank you very much. I'm wondering if there's time for one more question. maybe I'll ask it, but okay, I just have this question. We talked today about the media and about women in media, and I wonder if you could talk about how your work is reviewed, whether the issue of gender ever comes up in the way that you were reviewed, whether you ever feel that things are said about you that flag the fact that you are a woman artist.
Okay,
Thank you.
I seem to be leaping in.
Yes.
Yeah, in those days when I used to write fiction, I mean, because obviously your sort of cultural, political articles don't get reviewed, nor does PALFest. But yeah, it was constantly flagged up that I was a woman. My first collection of short stories told me a whole lot about the politics of reception, where every single review mentioned Shahrazad. Every single review. Mentioned Shahrazad and had words in it like weaving and like web and like veil and so on. Yeah, I think with The Map of Love, I kind of, the first lot of reviews, which were really bad actually, were all about romance and were all flagging the sort of woman aspect. And when they talked about the politics, it was to do them down. It was like, we're really fed up with novels that deal with our colonial guilt and so on. When it was shortlisted for the Booker, which was just like the most amazing piece of luck, and then came out in paperback, then the reviews were respectful, which is really interesting how that happens. And I seemed to have emerged from that space of A, being a woman, and B, being an Arab Muslim woman who was writing in English, rather like a dancing monkey. You know, sort of she can stand up on her hind legs and sort of do these things. The nomination for the Booker and then eventually the sort of barrage of political articles on Palestine kind of got rid of all that.
Right. And, yeah. So I don't know if anyone else wants to respond. Or, right?
I'll respond. So I guess I feel the same way about scales as I do about reviews. I know if my work's good. And, you know, it's really lovely to get a good review. It helps you financially. It helps you in a lot of different ways. But I think a woman's worth has to start with looking at herself. And I think the same thing as artists. We have to look at our own work and judge ourselves. Because I know a lot of artists that stopped creating art because they get a bad review. I know a lot of writers that, you know, really get so depressed over a bad review over a show. And I think it can be really, really detrimental. I also think, again, we're lucky to have more female reviewers and more writers, but just like Fortune 500s and Congress and so many other places, you know, to have more women in higher levels of media would be fantastic.
Okay. So, thank you so much. I just have one thing to say to you before we thank our speakers, that we do have a treat and Jessica will introduce the treat. But may I thank you so much for letting art anchor this day. I hope we go out imagining you have opened some walls for me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So we have a real treat for you today, and I really want to thank the president for allowing us. We'll just stay here. We're, oh, really? Yes.
Don't you want her to have the stage?
No, I'm good. Yeah, so we've had a very short time. I want to say one quick thing, though. Someone asked the question about I'm not an artist. I didn't think I was an artist. I didn't think I was a playwright. I didn't think I was a singer, like, until I saw other people, and they helped really encourage me to practice my art. So I just want to say to every one of you, I really am not a fan of people saying, oh, I'm an artist, as if someone else is not. We are all artists. I want to encourage all of you to go out and practice art as much as possible and as often as possible. And in our audition process, we ask girls to come in and write about or sing about or dance about something they care about. And the majority come in thinking that they're not artists and they're not writers and they're not great. And the incredible young woman, the young rapper I want to introduce you to today is one of these incredible women that basically, again, it's like putting Miracle-Gro on someone's incredible talent. And let me introduce Brianni Michelle from Canarsie, Brooklyn.
Hello. So since I don't have the music with me today, can I just ask everybody to clap for me? Somebody lied when they said it was a man's world. We taking over, yeah, it's us girls. We gonna have a female in the White House. First president wearing a white blouse. Put your hands in the air, girls, we rule. We the smartest in the schools, and all these boys better step aside, cause it's the fourth wave with a big old tide, yeah. Female doctor and female director, female detective, female police, executive chief. We could be catty, but we still bring the peace. Rockin' now, we rockin' now, yeah, all my ladies know what I'm talking about. We rockin' now, we rockin' now, all my ladies know what I'm talking about. Girls, we taking over the world. We got a big voice and it's loud. Girls, we're girls, we say it loud and proud. G-I-R-L-S, you can't live without us. G-I-R-L-S, you can't live without us. Girls, 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 girls. G-I-R-L-S, you can't live without us. Girls. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Wonderful. So wonderful. Yes. Okay, Barnard community. We have a wonderful close to the day. Our president, known affectionately by some of the Barnard faculty as El Presidento, Brenda Spa. Brenda Spa. Jeffrey Spa. You know.
Well, I think given the topic of today, it really at least should be La Presidenta. Let's just put that out there. Well, thank you to where's our incredible artist? You are amazing. Thank you. And what a way to end this day. And to all of our artists here and to all of the panelists and everyone here today, wow. We never quite know what these days are going to look like, and it's just been a treat, I hope, for all of us to see and hear and learn from and be with this amazing group of women. The women who've been on the stage, the women who've been in the seats, the women who are running behind the scenes and doing all the work. So thank you to everyone. I want to do a big shout out to two people whose names have not been mentioned thus far. Lisa Hollabaugh, who was the person who put this whole thing together. This is Lisa's first year in this role. This is her first symposium. Talk about trial by fire, but thank you, Lisa, for everything you've done. And Joanne Kwong, our Vice President of Communications, who, along with her staff, has made everything come together and be heard and all of that. Oh, there you are, thank you. And all of their staffs whose names I will not mention, but thank you to everyone who's really made this work. So at the end of each of these days, I go through this sort of insane exercise of trying to, you presented a rap. My rap is quite different, to wrap it up. Are there any, and I will not do it to verse or clapping or anything else. But the beauty of these days is we hear so many different things and so many different perspectives, but I think part of the learning that we go through is to try to find what themes exist. And then over time, as the series has gone on, to think of things that link them together and things that separate them. So this is by no means scientific, but just as I've sat through all these sessions, I'm just trying to think, what are the dominant themes that we've heard today? And I'm going to talk, and I'll keep this very, very brief, but just very briefly, I want to mention mothers, men, money, politics, and failure. Because these are words that I kept hearing come up again. I imagine if art had been earlier, it would have driven through. There's a certain just a pattern to all of this. But the theme of mothers is so interesting. And this is something, as I mentioned earlier, that it's come up at each of the symposia, but in different ways. Because when we think about women's issues, I think we tend to think about women as young women, as women finding their way into relationships, as women becoming mothers. We don't talk about women as daughters, all that frequently. And yet, when we, every time somebody asks the questions, who influenced you? What's your secret sauce? 80 to 90% of the time, people talk about their mothers. And then we also hear about the mothers as the constraint. And so I think this is just a whole area that's really ripe for further conversation and further thought, because all of us, have mothers. And so looking at how we are raised by mothers and then how we become in turn mothers. And Panmela brought up the question, not just mothers to daughters, but mothers to sons. And how do we, and this came up in Brazil, how do women as mothers shape their societies by virtue of what they teach their sons and how their sons become men and partners and husbands and fathers? Which brings up my second M word, men. I think the word men came up more times in this panel, in this day, than it has previously. And without those sort of nasty adjectives attached all around it. I think one of the things that the women's movement is becoming more comfortable with is how we invite men in. I think feminism has moved to some extent away from the men are evil phase. Although we certainly give into that from time to time. But how do men become part of the conversation? People like Jimmy Briggs, who we've had here several times at Barnard. How do men get involved in stopping violence against men? We heard about the street performers, men realizing the role they play in stopping violence against women. So I think as we do future symposium, it would be very nice at some point to have a whole session on the role of men in this movement. We heard a bit, but it was an interesting theme about politics. And this is something I particularly want to underscore for the students in the room here. Ultimately, a big part of power does rest with politics. And I thought Kieran Betty was very interesting in saying, if you really do want to get involved politically, you have to focus on that. You have to start early. You have to realize what's getting involved. I think sometimes, remarkably, we still have sort of a romantic vision of politics. I don't know how that's still possible in this country, but we do a bit that, I'll live my life and at some point I'll run for office. It doesn't work that way. And I think the comments we heard, and this particular I'm addressing to the students here, get involved in student government early. Get involved in student activism early. Just don't beat up on me in your activism. Or you can. But really think about what it means to exercise power. Because it's not, I don't know anyone who's a natural politician. Politics is something that's learned, and you have to practice it. The fourth thing I want to mention is money. And interestingly, money has not come up in the other symposia, and yet it came up fairly frequently here today. And I just want to touch upon two aspects of this. One was the aspect that was just voiced here so eloquently by Ahdaf and others. Are there things that don't have any relationship to money? Do we actually want to value women's work as a monetary commodity, or does that actually devalue it in some ways? I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's a really interesting question. And then the second aspect of money that I think Gillian Tett really underscored this morning is that if women want to get more power in the world, they have to understand money. And I loved your phrase, that money is the bones and the blood of the international system. And I think women in particular tend to want to pretend that's not true. Money feels kind of dirty, it feels kind of awkward, it's not what we want to talk about. And yet, to do art takes money. Plays need producers, novelists need readers and publishing houses. So I think we need to get comfortable talking about money and thinking about it and understanding the role it plays for all of us. And then finally, although it's probably the wrong line to end on, I do want to talk about failure. Because I thought, as several people said, the question that was asked earlier was really so important. And this is a bit of the evangelizing I've been doing over the past few years around some of my own work. I actually agree with the student questioner. I think every one of us women who has the privilege to sit on this stage or any other stage has a responsibility not to go on and on endlessly about our failures, but to be honest about our failures. Because I think unless we own up to our failures, we are just sending the next generation a false bill of goods. Because if we kind of up here look like we're doing it all, we're lying. Because I'll speak for myself, but I suspect I can speak for others. You know, any woman who's had the level of success that has brought her to the front of any stage has had serious screw-ups along the way, and has made serious, except Yvette, who's perfect. The rest of us mere mortals have had serious screw-ups along the way, and I think we do need to talk about them. But to tweak that just a little bit, I actually also, at the same time, I hate the failure question, because I get asked this all the time. You know, tell us about your biggest failure. And you go through that moment, as I watched Ndidi go through and going, oh my God, I'm a failure because I don't have a failure. You know, it's like another expectation. And the expectation is that you have this big, beautiful, perfect failure from which you learned an immense amount. I don't think that happens. I think I just screw up on a daily basis. And my trial is to try and fix those mistakes and hopefully learn something from them, and realize that, you know, making mistakes is just part of what we do. And again, I think those of us who've been lucky to, you know, to get to some positions of prominence, again, we shouldn't wear all of our dirty laundry out there all the time, but we do need to own up to our mistakes, our troubles, our struggles, and realize it's just life. You know, life is not this clean thing. And I will end with the note, and this is, I think, what I've seen from every single woman in every single symposium in every country we've been. Life isn't linear. I don't think any woman up here said, yes, I'm living exactly the life I thought I would be. You know, when I was 3, this is what I knew I would be doing. And I just lined all the stones up in a nice, neat pattern, and I walked on them, and here I am. You know, life throws you curveballs. I think we've seen from all of these women, the extent, you know, women from South Africa, women from China, we're all affected by the circumstances in which we're born and raised and grow up. And you respond to those circumstances, and that makes you who you are. And hopefully you respond in a powerful, interesting, creative, curious, art-making way. But it's not neat and it's not clean. So I hope that's not too pessimistic a note to end on. I think that as an optimistic note. So thank you all again for being here today. Round of applause for everyone who's spoken and done all the work. Go forth and make great art and change the world in whatever ways make most sense to you. Thank you. No.